Welcome back to the Umuco podcast with Alex and Dydine, a podcast where we talk about cultures from all around the world, interviewing guests from different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Today we are interviewing Kira Omans. She's a great woman, a friend of yours,
yes,
friend of ours now. But yeah, she's an actor, she's a dancer, she's an adoptee, activist. She has a lot to tell. Great story.
Yeah.
And you've known Kira for
I've known her for almost 5 years, I think, and she's an incredible human being, very smart, and she shares about her background. She was adopted from China at a very young age, months actually.
Yeah, she was a toddler.
She was a few months old, and she grew up in DC. So she shares her cultural understanding.
And we have a great conversation about identity and kind of how she's moved in the world, being born in China, but growing up in a different family, different ethnicity than her own in Washington, D.C. And the way she's carried herself through life is just fantastic. And I think it's very inspiring.
She does carry herself with grace. And, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
So please enjoy the episode.
Enjoy the episode. I've been following you on Instagram. I know we haven't seen each other, but I feel like I know a lot of what we're going through, all of us. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so how you were advocating, you were doing advocacy for adoption. And I was like, this is new. A lot of people don't think about the lives of the children when they grow up. We just think, you're adopting this kid because the kid is going through something at a very young age, but then the upbringing and how they face the world. And I was just so happy to see that that's what you do. So thank you for coming here, and you're going to be educating our listeners a lot. I'm going to be learning at the same time.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I think you are incredible. I read your book and everything, and because when we first met, you had given me a copy of your book, and I was just reading it and just so in awe of you. I mean, you're just so joyful and just lovely, and just everything about your life. I was just so in shock. And so I just am so inspired by you, and I think you're amazing. So absolutely, anytime I can do anything for you, just let me know.
You are so sweet. Kind. You're so kind. Thank you. I don't even remember that I gave you the book.
Yes, you signed it and everything. I was so
thrilled. And that was a while back. It's been like 4 or 5 years. It's been a long time.
Oh yeah, no, it was before I moved here. So several years ago.
All right, so enough of chit-chatting. Let's go to the business. So would you please tell our listeners a little background about your work, your story, your upbringing, something, brief that can introduce you.
Sure. I was adopted from Zhongshan, China when I was about 10 months old. I was found when I was 5 months old, abandoned by the side of a bridge. I was brought to a hospital and then brought to the orphanage. And my parents adopted me and brought me back to the United States. I was raised just outside of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria. I have a younger brother adopted from Korea and a younger sister who is my parents' biological child.
I didn't know that part at the beginning of the story. That's the first time I've heard it, so that's why I probably am like, my God, I'm glad you were found, and I'm glad.
Yes. Me too.
Because at that few months you don't have power over anything. Life is just happening to you. Yeah. So you're meant to be here. So I'm glad that we met. That you're here.
Yes. Exactly. I feel the same.
What was it like growing up? You said outside the DC area. Yeah. What was it like growing up? Being adopted, because you knew you were adopted, I'm sure, from a fairly early age. Did you have any identity situations going on? What was that like?
Absolutely. I think that in general, it would be hard for adoptees, especially those who are in multicultural families or multiracial adoptions, to not have identity crisis. Just complications, as you're growing up. my parents did a really wonderful job of just normalizing that when I was younger. Like, that is just how our family is. This is how I came to be a part of the family. And I always felt very loved, and it was never a strange thing. I went to a predominantly white and private elementary and middle school without a lot of diversity there. And I think that that very much exacerbated how I was feeling ostracized and different, not just as an Asian girl, but as an Asian girl in a white family, where I felt like I was raised and had the same upbringing as all of my peers, but I was treated so differently because of the way that I looked. Whereas when I went to high school and was meeting more Asian people, or I was going to events because I'm a Chinese dancer and going to Asian American events in the DC area, I was not Asian enough to fit in with the Asian American community either. And so it was this weird in-between place of being not white enough to fit in with white people, not Asian enough to fit in with Asian people, and just feeling like, where do I even belong? I was definitely having a lot of identity complications. And it was something that took me a while to find strength in, and to view it as an asset and something unique about me as opposed to something different. And I think that that was largely due to finding the adoptee community, and that community has supported me and so many other people I know in so many ways.
I think you can relate.
Yeah.
Alex and I had a conversation about, it was a conversation about being Black enough. And he had growing up, had similar experiences.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing?
Yeah,
Sorry,
well,
I'm putting you on the
No. And I didn't want to get too in depth in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those identity crises that I think every young person goes through in one, way, shape, or form. But yeah, with me personally, it was the whole dichotomy of being Black enough, because I grew up in a predominantly white area. It was the whole thing about being referred to as an Oreo, like white on the inside, Black on the outside. And for my older brother and myself, it was very damaging, because it wasn't just from the white kids, but it was also from the Black community as well, who was kind of adjacent to the area that I grew up in. And so it was just a lot of back and forth about where do we belong. I didn't really feel like a Black kid for a lot of my life. And I knew I wasn't white, but I was like, where do I fit in? How do I find my identity? And it was really, really challenging. And I didn't really start to feel comfortable within my own skin until probably close to like 20 years old, when I was in college. It was just really challenging. So I can relate to you, well, I guess in part to your struggles.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's humanity. We just are the same in so many ways that we don't realize that, you are a Black kid growing up in Texas and you're experiencing this thing, and you are Asian kid in DC experiencing that type of, life crisis. Yeah. And I'm sure, I myself moving here, I had no idea what was going on in America.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting when you're going through that, that emotional roller coaster at a very young age, and to be able to mentally survive it, because you can lose yourself in those moments unless you have found, that tribe, the people that are going to understand what you're going through. How did you find the adoptee community to support? Like, how did you find that support?
I think I truly found the adoptee community. It was around 2015 when I first entered the Pacific Miss Asian American pageant. I wanted my platform in the pageant to be about intercultural understanding and using my experience and my platform to elevate issues that adoptees and our community faced. And by doing that, that was when I really began to do a lot of research and learn more about adoptees, because I felt that around late high school, college was when I started to feel confident in being an Asian American woman, but there was that extra layer of being adopted that I didn't really explore until about halfway through college. And so by doing that pageant and by building that platform and trying to give a voice to our community, that was when I really started to find that support and be in contact with not just adoptees, but also adoptive parents who wanted to hear about my story and learn about issues that their own children could be facing one day and what was going on inside their own minds. But I think that community really just, I feel like we really lift each other up. And I think it's just a really beautiful community to be a part of. There's always going to be disagreement in certain opinions about different topics, but for the most part, I think that we all very much have one another's backs.
That's beautiful. You mentioned in the introduction that you were a Chinese dancer.
Yes.
Yes. Is that, did I say correct?
Yes.
Chinese dancer. So you grew up in a white neighborhood and with the white parents. How did you get into Chinese dancing? And at what age? Is that your parents, were involved? What happened?
Oh, yes. Good question. So when I was 4 years old, my parents were very active about ensuring that I had connections to my culture and that I went to cultural events and everything. And so when I was 4 years old, they took me to a festival in DC and the Fairfax Chinese Dance Troupe was performing. And I just fell in love with it. They bought the DVD of their dance recital and I would just dance in front of the TV at 4 years old. And they were just like, okay, we have to sign her up for classes. Yeah. So I did that and I've been with them ever since I was 4 years old. I mean, my dance teacher is a huge part of my life. She is the primary reason I have the connection to my culture as I do, just because another aspect of being adopted internationally is that my parents, as much as they would try to immerse me or give me the resources to access my culture, they are not part of that culture. Yeah. And they're also outsiders looking in. And so everything that I had to do was a very active process to try and connect to my heritage. And that can also, there's a lot of imposter syndrome that comes with that as well, just because because I wasn't raised in a Chinese household, it's almost like every now and then there are doubts, like, am I appropriating my own culture just because I'm having to learn everything the way someone who wasn't raised in a Chinese household would have to learn it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never thought about that particular situation because I can imagine along with the imposter syndrome, there is like the question that pops up, am I appropriating this culture? Like, even though you are of that heritage, you don't really have the experience within that. So there would feel, I guess, some sort of like, I don't know, discomfort maybe.
Absolutely.
That's really interesting. I've never thought about that particular thing.
Have you been to China?
I have not, but I am currently learning Mandarin so that when I go back, I will feel less like a tourist. But no, it's definitely on my list. It's something I would really like to do.
Yeah, that's very interesting too. I never thought about it. If I was to, because I speak my language and I understand the culture, so I can imagine a child like Rwandan descent, how they will learn the culture, because it's a lot. Even myself, I don't understand fully all the cultures back there in my home, and I grew up for 20 something years, and I'm losing some of it too after like 7 years here in the States. So
American culture can do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But I guess your existence, it's the culture, you just, you being, alive. And I think that's,
and it's such a, because I know there's a lot of people who would go through what you have and come out feeling, and a lot of times more lost than they had, when they were younger. But it seems like with your parents, with the community that you found, your friends, your family, there is something very stable in your identity, and that's great to see. And I just wonder, what exactly do you feel like grounds you in life now? Like as a human, as Kira, what gives you that grounding and that humility?
Yes, I think that actually the pandemic has put a lot of things in perspective for me, as I'm sure it has for so many people. And I was so career driven. I was so career focused beforehand. I was go, go, go all the time, just never stop, never rest. And when I was forced to take a break, I think that that was when I really realized all these beautiful connections I had made with people, both like my husband, my family, my friends, everyone in the adoptee community. It was a very, like you said, humbling, I feel like, experience for me. And just to know that that's very much what brings me joy in life. That's why I do what I do. It's not so much like it became less about like constantly climbing for success and more about like reflecting on the impact that I felt I was already having and the people who were I was learning from and they were learning from me, and just that we were able to help one another.
Yeah.
And so I think that maybe a cliche, but very much the connections and the relationships that I have are very much at the forefront of what keeps me grounded.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. I think definitely this pandemic put a lot of perspective in our hearts. So, you know, that was a moment that we just had to sit down and look at our lives, at ourselves. It's like sitting down and looking in the mirror. Who am I? What am I doing? Where I want to go? But before then, I pretty much was like the same way. And sometimes I felt like I was you know, when you're like, the world is way faster than I can be, and I can
Yes.
yes, and it was kind of exhausting, you know, like things are moving really quickly, and trying to catch up, you know, with everyone and everything was a little bit too much for me.
It was a lot. It's a lot, especially in this city. You know,
Yeah.
You've been here before the pandemic. What was it, 5 years?
Yes,
And
I'd been
there's
here
a particular
5 years.
pace that is kind of required to
Yeah,
move in this city.
yeah,
And I'm from Texas, like you
Yeah.
had said, and Texas has a much slower pace, which I'm used to. I loved it. Then I moved here, and it was kind of hard. It was challenging to keep up with that pace, and then pursue what I wanted to. I'm an actor as well. That's why I moved here in the first place.
there are the two actors in the house.
Yeah,
Amazing.
Yeah.
But it was also challenging though. It was challenging to sort of ground myself, to find this sort of stability. And I was couch surfing, doing the whole, you know, first move to LA thing. But just kind of trying to keep my head above water. But then when the pandemic hits, and of course I meet Dydine, which is another rock in my life, obviously.
Aww.
But it did sort of force us to stop and really take into account what's important to us, like you said, and sort of reevaluate where you want to go, but why you want to go there. You know, and that was, I think, the most rewarding thing for me, is just reconnecting with myself, you know, as a human, like not trying to compare myself to whoever, and you know, why am I not further along, or you know, it just, I don't know, it was challenging, of course, but that was the best part of it for me. You know, is to reconnect with my humanity and you know, my dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great to continue to stay ambitious and to keep moving forward and to set goals for yourself and to deliver and reach your full potential. But at the same time, I think that before I made those kinds of realizations, I was doing so at the expense of my own happiness. Very much my productivity was my self-worth. And I think that being able to just pause and be able to appreciate how far we have all come, even if we're not exactly where we want to be, just be like, look how far we've already come.
Yes.
We can have faith in ourselves that we will get there at our own pace, at our own time, not comparing ourselves to other people. And it's so much easier said than done. I still have issues. Like I'll be scrolling through social media and just be like, why am I not where this person is yet? And it's like, well, they had to go through their own challenges, their own journey, all of that stuff my story is just very, very different.
Absolutely. But then now, as the pandemic hits, we went through a lot of the hatred arise in the way that we haven't, I hadn't seen it before here in America. Maybe happened before I came here, but that was way too much hatred and divisionism, like, you know, all over. And it was a pandemic when the house was the protest, the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yep.
And then it followed by Asian hate crimes, and not rise even more. How did you deal with those, like, you know, with those with that atmosphere? Because the atmosphere had already, I don't know, changed in a way, especially like last year, since like May last year, and the election was going on. There was a lot of, you know, turbulence, I would say. Those. Yeah.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, it's a scary, scary time. I mean, it's very tension-filled and heated time in our country, just for a variety of reasons. And it's really, I mean, just being stuck in my home, just feeling very vulnerable, like my people are under attack, like I can't go anywhere. I'm not going to be safe if I go anywhere. And it's really scary. I mean, I don't have to tell you all that, because
we're in the same boat.
As far as, sorry?
I was saying we're in the same boat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even when the Stop Asian Hate movement began to happen, it was so powered and inspired by so many steps that the Black Lives Matter movement had taken before. And I think that the Asian community is so often viewed as being more docile and just more submissive and able to roll with the punches. And I think that at least like many people, but especially people in my generation, were feeling very empowered, you know, and there was a lot of solidarity between communities. And so that was, I mean, those were definitely the light spots in what was otherwise a very, very dark time, you know, just to see other people standing with each other and all of that stuff. But yeah, it's definitely had to limit my news consumption.
It's challenging. And to what you just said, there was some sort of awakening, if we can call it that, and not just with the Stop Asian Hate movement, but with the Black Lives Matter, but with anything that's oppressive. And I do think I can credit social media for that sort of thing. Obviously, there are the negatives that go along with social media, but this sort of unifying voice that sort of galvanized and empowered people who may have otherwise felt powerless or voiceless. There was something there that happened last summer and the previous year that just felt like a silver lining in a way, you know. And it was scary, still is scary. And you do have to limit your news consumption, because there are times where, like, a month in like November-ish 2020, it was depressing. Like, everything you turned on or you scrolled, you'd see some, or what do they call, doom scrolling?
I was about to say, I found myself
horrible.
Doom scrolling quite frequently.
It was horrible, but it was just, it's nice to see the unifying voices. That was very rambly, but I think my point came
No, not at all. I completely agree with everything you were saying.
Yeah. I think I remember when it was happening, in my heart I was like, yeah, change is happening. You know, you could feel that a lot of things are going to change. There were things that usually people don't speak up about, like you just mentioned. I remember listening to one of my friends' podcast interview, and she was talking about the Asian women's sexualization. And I was listening to it. I was like, oh my God, how is that even a thing, you know? And the more we speak about these things, the more they're not normalized, because when they're being spoken in the household or parties, and people laugh at it as though it's a joke, but in reality, it's actually happening, but when we speak up about these things, that's when we see change. So what do you think of that? The Asian women sexualization, have you ever heard of it? Is there anything you've seen or you have anything to say about it?
Oh, absolutely. I began to experience it when I was very young. And then after, like I mentioned before, I won the Pacific Miss Asian American pageant in 2015, I started to get just slews of messages, unprompted, just horrible things. And I just was not feeling empowered to speak up about it, because when I would go to the organization about it or my parents about it, they were just like, this is just what happens. And so I think I suppressed a lot of my anger and confusion and frustration, but I was 19 when I was receiving these messages. Yeah. And so I didn't know what to do. Like, I was very much like deferring to the adults who I thought knew what they were doing. And they were just like, this is just something you have to deal with. And so I was like, okay, I need to toughen up and deal with it. But now I worked with a friend of mine, her name is Allison Park, and we recently wrote a statement about online sexual harassment. And just I've been doing more work about the over-sexualization of Asian women and bringing awareness to that. I recently spoke with the University of Michigan, a research team, and they're doing a research project about this as well, and how online and social media has also been aiding this. And so they're working to come up with more tools to protect people from unsolicited messages and pictures. And so it's very much a problem, not just in stereotypes, but how those stereotypes are reinforced by the media that we consume, just the television shows and and pictures, and the shooting that happened last March, I believe, in Atlanta. So, I mean, I think that really began a conversation about it and how it's so oftentimes ignored, and that is still not, that particular shooting is still not being regarded as a hate crime, regardless, even though it was targeting Asian women for his sex addiction. And so people are always very quick to be like, it's just one person. And it's like, that one person had his own issues, but our society very much aids a certain narrative. And that's a problem.
And he felt empowered enough to act on it. And that's where the problem is, because there's so many other people like him that if we don't speak up or if we don't stop them, they will keep doing the same thing to other women. So it was one person, but then how many lives that were taken, you know? It
was one person who decided to act on it, but how many people are in their homes right now sort of stewing with that same rage and discomfort and insecurity within themselves. And you had mentioned the people who have the conversations at home, how that sort of perpetuates these negative stereotypes or negative thoughts. That sort of thing, that's something that I feel like we all experience in holding each other accountable. Because we all have family members or friends or people that we, I don't know, go to dinner with, who will make a comment who you're like, that's inappropriate, or I don't feel comfortable that you said that. We all sort of know people like that. And the point that you were making, Dydine, is that, or the friend that she referenced, we all like the creepy uncle, or the uncle that everybody just sort of like laughs, like, oh, he's just being himself. He just has his jokes. But that uncle has never been held accountable in his entire life, probably. So it's normalized for him to be able to make those jokes, and nobody really hold him accountable for that. And that's just a very specific example about what we do as a society.
But then they go out and act on they make jokes at home, but the jokes at home, that's what they take out into society and enforce it to people that you've never met. And I feel like I was listening to an interview you did with these two girls from Canada. They're also adopted. Yes. And they mentioned about how in their family, one of them mentioned how in their family, there are racist people in the family that they love them, the adopted kids, but they go out there with racism, comments or whatever. We have a friend also. Her name is Dee. She also was adopted from Sri Lanka and grew up in Europe, Germany. So she had never seen anybody that looks like her for a long time.
Wow.
But her uncles will make horrible comments about black people because a lot of Sri Lankan people look like they're black. They're Asian. They're Asian, but they have darker skin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they sometimes white people think they're black. Like what like they will tell you're from a different country. You know how people would give you a country where you were born, even though it's not where you were born.
Oh,
so,
yes.
Yeah, so that's what happened to this girl so many times, and she had uncles that were blunt racists, but they didn't think that she's sitting there, she's listening, she's being hurt by those comments at the same time. I wonder if it's something you've seen.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that even, at least for myself, my immediate family members would never say anything like that. But when you see so many things in society, and you have, like, even worse, if you have people in your immediate life speaking like that and reinforcing those stereotypes or those very twisted ideals about a huge group of people, then that can also lead to a lot of internalized self-hatred, which is always really sad to see.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very prevalent in a lot of adoptees who are still working to come out of that. I know that for myself, when I was younger and growing up and all of my classmates were white, I had a lot of, I would laugh at jokes like about like Asian people, and I would think like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. Mm-hmm. Whereas, yes, it does. When I go out into the world, I am seen as nothing except Asian. Mm-hmm. I like having white parents or being anything remotely to white adjacent is not going to save me if there is someone committing a hate crime. And so it's really unproductive to think that way when you won't be treated that way when you're viewed by other people in the world, just like the stereotypes and the dominant narratives that surround your ethnicity are how you are being treated and viewed. And like, we're all working to address our own biases, and hopefully more so now that there's been more education surrounding it. But it's incredibly harmful and very sad to see. My grandparents, on both sides of my family, very conservative, would speak about things like, especially more so with the last election, about their views about different groups of people. And like, not to go too into detail, but
we get
not
it.
good things, not good things.
Yeah.
And my mom would yell at them like, you have Asian grandchildren. And they're just like, well, they're not who I'm talking about. And she was like, yes, they are. Like, they are part of that group. They are Asian American and they are your family. Yeah. And there's just a disconnect that people have there where I just don't think that it really connects to them, because when you have those broad stereotypes, I feel like you're not really viewing them as human beings. Like, they are like the way that people view people online as like a brand. And so it's like much easier to say awful things or do awful things or treat people badly when you don't view them as equally a human being with thoughts and feelings and emotions.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a way of dehumanizing. Because, that's the first step in being able to talk badly about someone else, is if you say something or you categorize them in a particular way that makes them seem less human than you are.
Yeah.
Whereas in the whole thing, this whole podcast is about sharing our humanity and highlighting what makes us human, because everybody has small differences, of course. But the moment you start to realize that you are not so different than I am, Dydine the same way, then you start to, it's harder to talk bad about it, because it's almost like looking in a mirror, Yeah. We all have issues. We all go through the same things pretty much. And so, particularly during that time, during the election, it's very easy to categorize someone and immediately make an assumption and then dehumanize them. And like you said earlier, Kira, it is easier said than done to lead your life with that sort of perspective. But really, truly, just walking through life with love and kindness in your heart, it is the most alleviating sort of monkey off the back thing that you can do. It really is. It's just because I grew up, around racists and people who were just openly, like, would make subtle like backhanded comments about my skin tone or about where I'm from or whatever. They didn't know anything about me. And so I know what it's like. Dydine, you know what it's like. Kira, you know what it's like to be seen as something less than.
You know, my first year here, somebody told me Ebola was happening in Africa, and she was a neighbor. She was joking. I was leaving my host family, their Jewish family, wonderful family, but then the whole neighborhood was just like one black family that was there. It's also a famous actor who was never, on the street that much. But I was the only other black person on the street, all the time in the neighborhood. And one neighbor, God, she thought she was making a joke, and she sees me and she said, Ebola, and she was like, yeah, I know. And I was like, what? I've been here for like 2 years. Ebola just happened. How do you think I brought it in my DNA? Just yeah. But
oh my goodness.
Yeah. But that was, I feel like, one of the first things that I started because I didn't understand how racism looks like. Because in Rwanda we don't think about it. Everyone is Rwandan. If you're from another country, most of white people in Rwanda, they're the minority, so they don't really make you feel, they don't have those racism tendencies, I guess. But when you came here, it looked different, so I didn't really understand a lot of the racism that happened to me. I thought of those people not just being polite, so I didn't really think they were being racist. But when she said that, I think that was the first time I started.
That's when it clicked. That there's something deeper.
Yeah, and I started asking questions, and some of my friends started explaining to me what it is. But it took me a second to really, understand the social structure of the American society. When did you understand racism?
I mean, I think that I experienced it when I was very, very young. There were kids in my classes growing up who would like pull their eyes back to make slanted eyes at me. They would say, and then there were other just microaggressions where they would say like, oh, well, you only got a good grade on that test because you're Chinese, or things like that. And I think my brother got it even worse than I did, but just really cruel things. And I would go home and I would know that those things like really hurt. And I think that I unfortunately started to understand it at a young age, where it's just because I look different, or because like my eyes are like this, or my hair is like this, and my skin is like this, then those other kids felt like they could bully me for being different. And so I think that was probably when I started to understand. And obviously like as I grew up and received more of an education and actually just went to a public school was when I felt like I was really being truly informed about the implications and how, unfortunately, it's not anything new. There's a lot of historical stories and examples behind racism in our country. It's very much rooted in our societal systems, and it just continues. And like you've said, because it is tolerated, until we create an environment where it's not tolerated anymore, and people are nipping it in the bud early and like saying this is not okay, then it's just only going to continue, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is why it's important to have these conversations. It's a start, at least we're drawing attention and
can you
highlighting.
imagine growing up like having to face that at a very young age? Like that's something out of that shouldn't happen in a child's life, and if the society can see how wrong that is, I don't know, because you start building those walls inside of you that were not supposed to be there. So you kind of you set up for failure. Like at a very young age, because you start feeling less than. If you're feeling, then how are you going to expect those communities to thrive? It's a sad truth. But I hope all these conversations that we do maybe will enlighten somebody in their home and start teaching their children differently.
It is education. in a way, right?
Absolutely.
It's about spreading that, like I said, and I will always harp on it, spreading love and spreading kindness, and through that comes understanding.
Absolutely.
And more tolerance.
And more tolerance.
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I wanted to
ask acting.
Rewind. Yeah, I wanted to touch on the acting stuff a little bit.
I know that's your part. You want that.
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, so you talked about dance at a very, very early age.
Yes.
Did that segue into, because I know you went to school for acting as well, did that segue to your love of performance?
I guess so, in more of a subconscious way than I think I often acknowledge. But I grew up dancing and performing. I very rarely experienced stage fright. I very much wanted to perform when I was younger. And when I would do school plays in school, I wouldn't get nervous, or I grew up playing piano as well and would do recitals. And I think that part was always in me. When I transferred high schools and began taking a theater class, I thought that I wanted to write. And I think that my theater teacher is very much the reason why I began to gain confidence in myself, because he very much nurtured my abilities and instilled a lot of confidence in me and love for acting. And so that was when I started to transition, and I went to governor's school for acting and then went to college for acting, got my BFA. But yeah, I definitely think that being the center of attention was something that I really loved.
You were born for.
That just never went away.
Yeah, I get that. That's interesting, because I was always, and still am, I'm very introverted. I was very shy growing up, and I always like to tell the story. I was very much into sports growing up. I was basketball. I swore I was going to go to the NBA. I was going to be some sports figure when I grew up. And then my older cousin, he's a producer, he's a director, and he press ganged me into one of his short films. As I saw it at the time, he's like, Alex, I really want you to be in my short film. I was like, I'm not an actor. I don't know what to do in front of the camera, blah blah blah. And then he was in high school, and he submitted it to a film festival. It won first place, and they flew us out there, into Indianapolis, and it was my first, foray into the whole premiere world. I was like, what? There's a red carpet, there's limousines, everybody's taking pictures of us in tuxedos, and outside of the finished product, outside of the glitz and glamour. But I started to fall in love with the process of creating the character as best as I could as a novice actor would, without any experience. But it was just the whole process of starting it, and then being able to see it on the screen, on a movie screen, theater screen. It was wow, this is crazy. This is crazy that people actually do this. For the rest of my life. Yeah, I never thought that I would want to be able to do that. But the thing is, I don't care for the attention outside of wanting to express myself. As a quiet kid, all I want to do is just I want to express the very deep, complex emotions in myself that I wouldn't be able to otherwise. And acting and specifically filmmaking, that was the avenue. I was like, okay, I can do this. And then, there's still the doubt. It was the high school musical thing. I was like, do I play basketball? Do I go into acting? Do I perform? And then my friends gave me a hard time. They thought, I was going to be doing Peter Pan for the rest of my life on stage. But like you, though, in college, I did have an acting professor. His name is Dean Nolan. I'll never forget him. He also instilled a confidence in me. He had said, Alex, if you want to do this, you can. You have a natural whatever, you can do this. You just have to put in the work. And it was the first time somebody sort of believed in me in that way. Right. Sat me down and talked to me, not as a child trying to just boost my dreams, but logistically. He had done Broadway before. I think he was in Mamma Mia back whenever. Wow. Yeah. But he talked to me. He's like, Alex, you can really do this. Adult to adult. I was like, this is this perhaps a career path for me, an avenue. But ever since then, it's this whole storytelling and acting. I love it, and it's something that I wish, I don't know. I'm not going to say everybody could do, but just to feel like you are able to be yourself and to express that in the way that makes the most sense for you. That's what acting was and is for me. It's changed a little bit since I've moved here, and I'm still sort of figuring my way out. But just the truth of it, just being able to show your truth, that is what it was all about for me. And I'm sure you can relate to that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, aside from being an attention lover when I was younger,
I want to see that kid.
I also think that when I was growing up and saw no Asian people in the movies or TV shows that I was watching, I had Mulan, and that was it. And I think that as I started to realize that this was what I wanted to do, that I love storytelling. When I wanted to be a writer, it was because I love storytelling. And as I was growing up, I realized I love people. I love hearing people's stories. I love the character work and really delving into someone else's shoes and trying to see the world the way they see it. Is just a really incredible experience. Yeah. Anyway, just to see, and I mean, I'm sure I know you can relate to the aspect of being a person of color, navigating the entertainment industry, thinking about the roles that we are offered and the portrayal of people who look like us and that added pressure of representation. And it's very much a challenge. But as I was realizing that this is what I wanted to do, I was really thrilled at the idea of constantly having to educate myself to truly understand all of these aspects of the industry on top of the art of acting.
And there's the whole thing, an actor's tool is their body and them, they don't have a ball, they don't have anything. It's just us, and it's us and our ability to connect to whatever piece of text we're working off of. But the education process, that was one thing I didn't really get into, i.e. that's the work aspect of acting, is doing your research and understanding, not just the character, but the context as to why they are the way they are and how do they operate within this particular world or setting that they're in. That's something that I sort of started to relay to my own life. And part of the reason why we have a podcast now and we have these conversations, we're educating ourselves. We're equipping ourselves with knowledge to better teach others, to share this thing.
Share the stories.
And in a way, I mean, podcasting is storytelling as well. It's a different form, but it's just, that's part of, the acting world really opened up so many different things for me in just being able to connect better. Connect better to people and just different flavors of life. Life seems so much more vibrant because I had the bravery, the courage to explore this thing that was presented to me. I'm sure you can relate with writing as well. Take up
writing pretty much for me is therapeutic, I would say. It was very much therapeutic for me. When I have feelings that I can't process, that's what I do. I just write them down. So I can imagine in, acting for you guys, expressing some emotions out loud, even if it's through another character, but it's a lived life, So at the same time, you are able to release your own things through that. I used to sing as a kid.
Oh,
in a church, at a church choir, and I
didn't know that about you.
This is something. It's a hidden talent. Is that how it? But I remember one thing really helped me was when I was singing, I would be crying about my own pain, but they would sing just because the song is really good. Because it was a church. You know how in the church choirs they sing some great emotional, spiritual gospel song, and they cry. Jesus. And in the name of Jesus, for me, those were the times I really, really cried about my pain.
Yeah.
And it helped. I feel like that was one of the things that helped me cope with whatever I was going through. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know how it does with you with acting. Does it when you are diving into somebody else's story, or even if it's I know you read, you do voiceover acting as well. Even if you're reading books, just have you read books, like other people's books, for
like audiobooks?
For audiobooks?
Yes, that's what I do full time. Is I narrate audiobooks. So I do film work as well. Right now, I've done. I think it was just especially during the pandemic because we couldn't do anything in person. I was just like full time voice actor, and I actually recently had the honor of narrating a book. An adoptee reached out to me. She's a Vietnamese adoptee, and she had written a book about Operation Baby Lift. And it was just really phenomenal. She wanted another adoptee to narrate her book. And I think that was the only time that I've ever been moved to tears by something that I was narrating. You know, she wrote about her story and everything, but I could very much relate to not remembering undergoing such a traumatic incident at such a young age, but then knowing that your body remembers that and certain triggers will activate that fight or flight instinct in you, and not really understanding why, and that being a scary thing. And also she wrote about going back to Vietnam and how that was just a very surreal experience for her. And just reading that and knowing that I felt so similarly. We were born in completely different countries. She's several, I think like 10 or 20 years older than me. And just to know that we had such a shared bond in that way was very emotional. And so I think that's definitely one of the rare instances where I felt like this was my story. I was seeing myself in this story. But in acting at large, like you said about writing, very therapeutic, cathartic work to just feel very emotionally vulnerable to be able to connect with someone. And that's something that, I'm a very sensitive person, and sometimes not a good thing. But I think that being able to use that side of myself and that quality that I have to be able to implement that into my work is very much a blessing.
It's special.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely special. What was the most important thing that happened to you when embracing your identity?
I'm not sure if there was a super specific moment, but I just think that in all of the work that I've been trying to do for the adoptee community and just hearing so many other people's stories, I think that by listening to other people share their voices, that was very, very empowering to me in my own identity, to be able to embrace the things that I felt that I was very strong in and the things that I felt like I wasn't, and I still had a lot of room to work, but to be able to have a community that I felt was hearing me and hopefully learning from me as much as I was learning from them, and just being able to all contribute our voices to create a narrative of adoption that wasn't just from the adoptive parent side, because that's the very much at the crux of the work that I do. Is I want people to think about adoptees not just as babies or as orphans that get taken to another country and put into another family, but human beings that grow up and have our own opinions about our adoptions and struggle with the trauma of experiencing those things at a young age, and not really understanding how those affect our lives as an adult, but trying to maneuver that. I feel like I've gone off track a little bit.
No, you're doing great.
But to be part of a community where we are all doing that, and we're all on our own paths to doing that, and are continuing to work on being empathetic to other people in that way, I think is just at large the most important thing that could have happened to me to embrace my identity.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
You didn't go off track at all.
No, you didn't.
Thank you. Halfway through, I started to be like, where was I going with this?
No, sometimes a stream of consciousness is good. Yeah. What does vulnerability mean to you?
I think that vulnerability to me means being willing to break down certain walls that I've built up for myself, or being afraid to show people my authentic self. And I think that it is so important, like in our profession, especially, to be able to stay vulnerable so that you can connect with other people and you can empathize with other people and not let your own biases get in the way of being able to form a deeper connection with someone else. And yeah, very much to me, vulnerability is being able to share those deeper sides of yourself and to not let the world harden you.
Yeah. You know, that's something your mom always tells you. Not something about the world hardening you.
What did she say?
My
mom tells me a lot of great stuff.
Don't let the world harden your heart or something like that.
She
that's
told
the
me
same,
that.
exactly the same thing here.
She told me, yes, and that's true. She told me in a very when I needed to hear it the most. Don't let the world, because she's very much like me, like us, I guess. But don't let the world harden your heart. You know, the world can be tough, but for us sensitive people, it can be easy to put up all these walls. But it takes strength to live, you know, in truth with yourself and to be vulnerable and to, you know, to share and care. Yeah. Oh, yes.
It definitely, because things happen, but and most of the time we don't have control over them. But this here, our hearts, you know, our mind, we have control over that, and we can, you know, not let it become like a rock. You know, let it stay soft.
That's key to keeping the world going and evolving.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
So through your work, you probably meet a lot of people from so many different countries. A lot of adoptees are from all over the world. Have you learned like different cultures? And because here on our podcast, we like to share different cultures and how different we are, and how that's actually an asset for us to realize how alike we are, and how we're all just a human race, you know, going through things. So have you noticed anything like that? And have you learned more? How much blessing has it come from that?
Oh, it's been wonderful. It's been incredible. I think that through adoptee work in particular, you know, to have so much in common with people I'm from China. I've learned a lot about the Korean adoptee community. They're very organized and do a lot of things for each other, and are very open-minded and will advocate for other communities as well. So them and the Vietnamese adoptee community, and there are, I don't know as many Latin American adoptees, but a couple. I know one woman from Colombia who is absolutely incredible and has such a powerful voice, and other adoptees from all over Africa and from Russia, and just and domestic adoptees as well. It's really just astounding how we have such individual stories, and how that also just makes us able to bond on such a deep emotional level, because adoption is so personal and everyone has a different experience with it. But I think that because something like that happened so early in life, it has given us an added layer of empathy to be able to understand one another and to be open to each other's stories and to find solidarity in that and strength together, where it's just so beautiful to see in the community when there is an issue facing one country. I think it was last year, President Moon of Korea had made a comment about adoptees, or like about rehoming adoptees. And I just watched all of these adoptees from all these different cultural backgrounds rally together and to have our voices heard and to share that adoptees are not disposable. It's very damaging to children to have to rehome them based on arbitrary factors, and that should not happen. And just that we can all very much find common ground in that the children and the human beings should be at the forefront of this system has been a very beautiful thing. And I think that regardless of our differences in beliefs within the community, that is what we all hope, is that the next generation of adoptees will have the resources and be empowered enough to not have to face the same struggles that we did, or at least hopefully we can help lessen all the struggles for each generation.
Yeah.
I'm so inspired by your work, and what you're doing, sharing your story and helping all these people, because it's not easy, to put yourself out there, because you can easily choose to just sit there and read the books and get paid, or just share other people, or acting, but on the top of that, you make the time to advocate for adoptees, and that's an incredible work, and of course a lot of people are going to benefit from it.
Thank you. I feel the same way about you. I am very much inspired by you and your work. And like I said at the beginning, read your book and was just absolutely amazed that.
Thank you.
I mean, you're absolutely incredible. I'm also very inspired by you.
Thank you so much. So what will be your message to adoptees or any other children, children in the foster care systems, all the young people are going through things that in the moment they they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. That what would you
I just wish I could tell them or share or help them feel that they are not alone. There are so many people who have gone through similar things, and being adopted and going through everything that comes along with that is such an isolating experience. And I think that's why it becomes so dangerous. Adoptees are 4 times as likely to commit suicide as non-adopted children. And that is just so crushing. And I think not all of it, but a huge part of that comes from the isolation that we feel within our own families. People who do love us and people who care about us so much, but just may not be able to understand us. And so I would just really hope that through all the work the adoptee community is doing, that we can reach more people who feel that isolation, and so they don't feel alone, and that they know there are people who care about them and love them and they can turn to and will truly understand them and help them through that.
Yeah.
Aww.
Are you sad?
No, I'm not sad. I'm no, it's just so nice to be able to connect with people and to have these conversations and to showcase that we do care, that there are people, of course, who do care and who are working to create change and to to make a difference, make an impact in people's lives.
Absolutely.
I am thinking about all the people, like you said, who don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, who may be having a very challenging time, the people who are working for them. Eventually those kids will, hopefully will run into someone who's made it their life's work to dedicated to help that one child and to turn their lives around. So yes, not sad, but I'm very happy, very optimistic.
Yeah. Do you have hope?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is so imperative to be able to continue in any kind of work where you're hoping to create change, because if you don't believe that it could happen, it can be bleak to try to force yourself to continue. And so I think that while the journey is tough and uphill, surrounding yourself with the right people and finding that tribe, finding that community to keep you inspired and hopeful is so important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. I was going to say amen.
Amen.
Oh, thank you so much for coming and talking to us and sharing your story. You are an incredible young woman. And it's been a blessing.
It has been, yeah.
To connect with you too, like to connect again, even though it was in the podcast, but it was really nice to just to see you smiling and doing what you love, and
and to meet Juniper.
Yes. So I feel the same way about both of you. This was so lovely. I just feel very uplifted talking to you both. You're both so smart and eloquent, and just so much compassion in the way you speak. And so it was very much an honor, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. How was it?
How was what?
The interview.
I don't know. How did you feel about it?
I felt great. I felt I learned so much. And I feel more aware about the adoption world. I don't think I ever mentioned to you, my mom almost gave me up for adoption. So I would have grew up in Germany, actually.
Oh, no, you told me about that.
Yeah, she was lined up with all other teenage moms.
Yeah, right.
And last minute, she couldn't do it. So she...
Well, you know, it's tough, and
I can't believe how my life would have turned out.
Yeah, and it's sort of the same thing that Kira talks about is you know, this is just the circumstances that a lot of young kids, infants find themselves in, and it's tough. But you know, I'm happy that we were able to have a conversation about it.
Absolutely,
and hopefully able to spread awareness and and empathy.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're a mom or a dad who have adopted a child, there's definitely a lot of information where you can learn things. She mentioned a nonprofit.
Yes, Adoptees for Justice. She did mention that. It didn't make the cut in the interview, but she talked about it a little bit afterwards. And they're a great organization that does what we're talking about. You know, they take in adoptees and they spread awareness and they make sure that these people have good lives. They don't have
a community where they can an outlet where they can share their feelings and their thoughts. And it's always important for all of us to have that space where we can share our feelings.
Absolutely. So make sure to go ahead and check out Adoptees for Justice and check out Kira Omans' wonderful work. I'm sure you've seen her at some point on TV and movies, or if not, have heard her voice. She has a great voice, voiceover artist.
She does a lot. She reads a lot of books. Just what do you call it? Audiobooks.
Audiobooks.
So thanks for listening to our interview. If you have any questions, please remember to comment below, subscribe to our channel if you like our work, and spread awareness of about what we do. All right.
Stay tuned.